Hello and welcome to this session on using journals to support learners' progression. Thanks to those people that have joined us live for the session. And if you're watching this on replay, I hope that everything is well. And do feel free to obviously pause the video as often as you need to check on things. And those of you that are watching live, just know that the session is obviously being recorded. So if there's anything that we go through too quickly, just know that you can always reflect back on the session after. If you are live in the session, please do feel free to use the chat window to ask any questions or pose any thoughts. It's great to have that interactivity and collaboration throughout the session. Those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Pullen. I work at the University of South Wales and I am the South Wales Apple Regional Training Centre Manager. I am also an Apple Professional Learning Specialist, so utilise a lot of the technology that we're going to talk about today in the classroom with schools that I've worked with all over the place, really. But let's get going with today's session. We are going to be largely focusing on the use of pages in the session today, but also kind of alluding to the role of notes when it comes to the planning approach to anything that you might be doing with technology. So that's what we'll be using in the session. As always, if you have any of these devices, please do feel free, if you've got it as a second device, to have a play along as we're going. But like I said, the session is obviously being recorded, so you're more than able to look back at it afterwards and try out some of the approaches that we talk about. So this is the basic agenda for what we're going to cover over the next hour. First of all, just to introduce the Pages app to people. You may well be familiar with it, you may well have used it before, but just really to make sure everybody is aware of all the different features that exist within the application. And then we're going to focus really on how to build multimedia books, both from a teaching point of view to create resources that might be utilised by students, but equally, to give people an overview of how that same approach could be used by students to demonstrate their learning and understanding of content that they might be doing in the classroom as an alternative to writing in books with just paper and pen. As always, if you were part of this previous session, I shared this book. It's a support book, really, that goes alongside these sessions, talking about utilising Apple Teacher in the classroom. The book itself provides you with some additional ideas for how you can utilise some of the skills that we're going to talk to you today. And also there is a journal that you can download within it for either yourselves or your fellow colleagues that you might want to support in their journey to become Apple teachers as well. So you can download this on the bookstore. You could just type in my name, Matthew Pullen, or type in the title of the book and you'll be able to find it. It's a free download, and it'd be great to hear from people if you have been using this in your classrooms as well. So let's get started. We're today, like I said, going to be looking at how we can utilize Pages in order to create journals. And we want to really start to have a look through these skills that are part of the Apple Teacher program. So if you have started your Apple Teacher journey, then you'll be familiar with the skills that it takes you through. And what we wanted to do is position those skills as part of the wider learning context of how would we actually utilize them if we were designing something from a teaching point of view. So in the session, we're going to be looking at the range of templates that are available to you, but equally focusing in on a specific one to do some building. We want to take a look at how we can add text and images and shapes and all of the other media content that you can add into it. I want to take a look at creating placeholders because from a point of view of design for students, it's very, very useful to have an understanding of how you can create a space which is obvious to the learners as to what needs to go into the space. Something that is done very well, I suppose, in worksheets where there'll be a gap left for students to fill in the missing word, etc. From a design point of view, that's equally as important if we're asking them to add in text or images or written elements, etc. So placeholders can really support that. Because this is a digital element, we'll also be looking at the idea of drawing and animation and how we can bring that to life within the books. These are multimedia books after all, so it doesn't need to be restricted to just text. And we can think about how we can do some other things. And if you do have an Apple Pencil, lends itself obviously perfectly well to this, but equally just using your finger, using any other stylus is equally going to meet the needs of some of the things that we're looking at today. Something that I'm very passionate about is the ability to provide opportunities for students to add audio to their books, not only from the point of view of developing their ability to communicate, but equally making the learning accessible to all. So adding audio from both the teacher point of view and audio from that student's point of view, because it's very, very important that we allow students a range of communication methods so that they can support and share what they've learned. And then we'll kind of finalize the session with just an overview really of how these Pages features can help provide feedback to learners. We know that feedback is one of the most important things that we can provide our students in the classroom, and being able to provide that feedback in a range of ways similar to what I just mentioned then about the use of audio, I think is going to be a very, very useful thing in the classroom. Okay, so I am going to come out of Keynote now and jump into Pages. So if you do have Pages, you can feel free to jump on that at the same time. Like I said, it is being recorded, so don't worry if I go too fast at certain points. Feel free to watch the recording and double check those things. So on my screen, you'll notice there's a whole range of applications. This is what mine looks like in terms of different documents. Some of these are journals that I've created for this. We're going to look at this one in more detail. But the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of give a basic overview of all of the things that we're going to be looking at and how Pages functions as a tool. So if I tap on plus here, you'll see that there are all these templates. Now, Pages often gets likened to Apple's version of Word. And whereas that, I suppose, is a translation across, it's not necessarily that they can do exactly the same things. And in fact, what I'm going to be looking at today is potentially some of the features that exist within Pages that don't exist necessarily within other word processing tools, and also thinking about how Pages could be used in a very different way to how it might be used if you were doing this maybe on a PC or on a laptop of any make. The first thing we notice when we go into the templates is the range of templates. Now, there are lots and lots in here to choose from, and as always with any start point, a blank page can be quite intimidating to learners. So whereas they'll see, this absolute infinite possibilities of things, and whereas we might think that's a good thing because it means that there's no restrictions, equally having that freedom to do absolutely anything can be in itself an intimidation thing in a classroom. So starting with any of these templates can be very, very useful just from a design point of view to think, how could I lay things out? Equally, you can create your own templates along the bottom here, some that I've seen other people have shared, or ones that I've designed myself for different purposes, and that again can be a very, very useful thing, and we'll look at that a little bit later when we've started to build some of the projects. The other thing I wanted to point out is within Pages, something that I love using a lot of the time are the books. And I suppose this links quite nicely to this idea of creating journals. And that's what we're going to start in today, because there are a range of different types of books which allow the kind of free flow of information. It's kind of moving away from it being a word processed document and thinking about using it as a specific kind of ebook, multimedia touch book, those sorts of things. You can get books in either portrait view or landscape view, and again, they come with a range of templates that you can start with. Really, it's down to you which one suits the things that you're doing. In today's session, I'm going to be building one around the water cycle, just because I need to have some sort of form of content in order to get started. You might not teach the water cycle, so it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do water cycle along with me, but I'm going to focus on that. And to do that, I'm going to choose this template here, this textbook one, not for any reason other than I think it's a nice template. It's going to be one I can work on. So feel free to use any of those templates. They all have different features, but I'm going to go ahead and open this one now. And the first thing you notice, like I said, is the fact that there is this kind of outline to the pages that I might want to utilize, and that can be very, very useful. The plus down the bottom here gives me some additional pages with different types of layouts as well, depending on what it is I want to add to the page. And of course, you do have the blank template page if you want to use that for anything you want to design for yourself. I'm going to go back to this first page, and the first thing I'm going to do is just change the title of this workbook journal that I'm going to create now. So it's going to be around the water cycle. And you see that I can quickly just change that text, have that text on the page in a style that I want. If I don't want it to be in this green color, that might not be the look I'm trying to present. Over on the side bar, or along the top bar, sorry, here, these are tools in order to add and edit anything on the page. So I don't want this to be green. It's a nice neon green, but it doesn't really match what I'm doing. So I'm going to tap on the paintbrush. Because I've got the text box highlighted here, what I get is an option to change things within that text box. I can change the style of the box itself. So you can see that I can change all of these. If I just go back, I can also change the text specifically. So here I have option to change that kind of main, what does that text look like? So the paragraph styles on the page, do I want it to be just a heading? In this case, title is absolutely fine. And I can change the color. So I'm actually going to go with something more blue because it's going to be about the water cycle. And in fact, what I like here is the option to have this gradient. So you can have fixed colors, you have preset colors, gradient. You can even have images if you want to, have water in the background or an image in the background. But what I like here is the fact that this might represent that kind of idea of a water cycle. Maybe I might make the bottom color a little bit darker. And this is that design kind of element, what works. And the nice thing is visually, I can see it over here as I'm changing it on the screen here. So take a moment if you've got this open on your screen at the moment, take a moment, just play around with some of those features and just see how you can change the text style, the font style, what works in terms of your design. Because although they're templates, you're not fixed to any of those things. So you do have that opportunity to make it something which works for your learners. And in fact, I quite like this one. It looks like it might be liquid, but the text is too big. So I'm just going to reduce the size of the text, just using this control here. Quite happy with that. I might just change the text in here. So let's imagine that this is for year five class. And again, I've got another text box here. Now, I might not want to put anything into this. I certainly don't need it around, it's not around the building blocks of life, so I could delete that out, or I could just change this. So let's just add that in. There we go, it's going to be our workbook. Now, the second thing we've got over here is an image. And at the moment, this image doesn't really represent the water cycle. So I'm going to change this image. Now, this is where we talked about placeholders before. Placeholders are a great way for students to be able to identify that I can change this image because there's a plus icon on the screen. And if I tap on the plus, it gives me the option to take a live photo. Now, at the moment, I'm in my office. There's nothing really to do with the water cycle in my office, but I could take a live photo. Really, really useful for students to use this in a active learning environment because they might be outside. You might create a workbook which is about exploring the world around them, and they might take some photos. And it means they don't have to take the photo and then find how to put them into pages, thinking about some of your learners where their IT skills might not be at that point. But if they know to just tap the plus, they can very quickly add in that image. For this, though, I'm going to choose a photo, and I'm going to go to my camera roll for this. And I should have some water cycle images. And I took some pictures and some video before, actually. I'm going to use this one, just one that I found on the internet. And if I double tap the image, I can change the size of this. I'm just going to put this on the front page. I think it kind of works as an intro element to the book that I'm created. So that's just my front page, just having a look at some of those overview type elements. Now, we can also add in other additional things here, and we'll look at this as we go through the session in terms of the way that we can add in other media. But I've added this in the first instance by just tapping on that plus. If I want to just go to the camera, I still have the option to do it here as well. So I can activate those things, but we'll look at those as we build the rest of the document. So that's page 1 done. That's my introduction page. I think the next page is really useful from my personal point of view. If I was creating this as a resource for my learners, to actually have a place where learners can give some information about themselves. So I'm actually going to delete the text on the page because I don't want any of the text on the page. And I'm going to start really with a blank element here where I want the students to tell me a little bit about themselves. And to do this, I'm going to use this plus icon and start to build something. And you'll see how easy this is to kind of create. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the media button. So plus, I've got the media section here, shapes, graphs and charts, etc. that you can use. We're probably not going to use them, like that they are there. You can use these if you need to. I'm going to go to the shape section, and the first thing I'm going to do is add in a shape. I'm just going to put this here because I think that's going to look nice. And then I'm going to go to another shape and I'm going to add that just above. And here I'm going to add in just some information. Now you'll notice on the screen, these yellow bars that pop up, they're very useful because they're going to help me keep everything lined up. So as I move things around the screen, you'll see those yellow bars pop up to show me that it's either centered or it's aligned to the left, aligned to the right. In this case, I want the boxes to be the same size. So if I tap on that blue dot to the side, it's going to show me that I've aligned that up. So those yellow liner tools are very, very useful to have on the screen to make sure everything's lined up. I'm going to tap into the box. You'll notice that this is a shape, but it's also a text box, and all of the shapes that exist in here are text boxes as well. So you can type into all of them as well as having a separate text box here. So that's useful to know. So I'm going to add in some instructions here. So add your image in the box below. Oops. Make sure I've got my spelling correct. And that doesn't need to be that big. That's just going to go here. And then above that, I want another box. So this time I'm going to copy this shape because then I'm going to know it's the correct dimensions. Again, using those yellow alignment tools, place that above. And in this one, I'm just going to say name. And then just put some lines where the students can put them. Put some lines so students know to put their name in there. Now, at the moment, that text isn't really big enough for the students to be able to utilize. So again, I'm going to tap on the box, go to the paintbrush, and I'm just going to make that text a little bit bigger so it's easier for the students to know what they need to add in. Now, let's imagine I'm using this with younger learners, and I've given them some instructions here. There's a couple of things that I can do to support this. I mentioned this before about the use of audio to support anything. This page, if I was instructing students face-to-face, is fairly simple to understand because I could say, everyone go to page 2, and on this page, you're going to put your name and add a photo into the box. But if I wasn't with the students at this point, and we know that, this is more and more, the norm at the moment, unfortunately, because students are having to self-isolate, remote learning, those sorts of things. What if the student didn't know what to do on this page? Well, actually, what I can also do here is go to the plus icon, go to the picture, and I'm just going to record some audio. Tap on record audio, get the button down the bottom to start, and I'm just going to give my instructions to the learners on what I want them to do as an audio recording. This page is all about you. Please add your name and either add a photo of yourself or draw a picture of yourself so that we know a little bit more about whose work is in this book. I tap stop. I can redo it, I can edit the voice, etc. I'm just going to go and tap insert. And now I have this button here, which is just going to give that information to the learner. So if they can't read, if it's a barrier to their learning because of English might not be their first language. It could be that they just don't have, they might be young learners and they might not be able to read things just yet. They can still access this work. So there's no barrier to what they can do. Now, this box here at the moment, there's no indication that I want them to add their photo in here. Now, I could add text in, like I've got this, so add the text in this box. But something that we can do which makes this really, really easy is let's start to design this so it's obvious to the learner what they are being asked to do. So to do that, I'm going to go back into the plus and go into shapes. I'm going to tap on the search bar here, and I'm just going to search for camera, because then I can come up with this icon here. I'm going to place this over here. Now it comes in the same color as the box before. So now I'm going to go to the paintbrush and go to style, and I can quickly change the color of that icon. So I now have something which is a little bit more obvious to the learner that I'm asking them to add a photo into this section. Now, we talked before about the placeholder idea. At this point, if all they saw was this, they would have to go to the plus. They'd have to know they go to the plus. They'd have to then go to the camera, the media section, tap on the camera, take a photo of themselves and add that in. Again, that's a lot of steps for a student who might not have ever used this application before. So let's make that a little bit easier for them. What I do is tap on both of these elements. So because this is on an iPad, I can touch the screen. So I'm going to tap within the first box and tap on the box around it as well. And you'll see that I've selected, selected both the camera icon. We'll get there eventually. There we go. We've selected both the camera icon and the blue box that surrounds it. I'm going to tap on group. This has now made that as one kind of icon. Now, what would be great is if I can turn this into a placeholder. Now, if this was a photo, so in this instance, these photos here, if you tap on the paintbrush, you'll see that you get the option to have it as a placeholder. So I can clear the placeholder set.
I don't actually get that option because it doesn't recognize it as an image that I could do anything with. So what I'm going to do is a bit of a cheat, really, or a little bit of a tip, I guess, not a cheat. I'm going to take the photos. So I've just dragged up from the bottom of the screen. Oops, not all the way. Dragged up so that my dock appears. And I'm going to tap and hold on the photos. I'm going to drag that up, so keeping my finger on it, and I'm going to drop it to the right-hand side of the screen. So this is this is my albums, etc. And what I'm now going to do is do the same thing again. Tap and hold on that image that I've created with the camera. I'm going to take it over and I'm going to drop it into the albums. And you'll see that that's now created an image in my albums. I can now delete the shape from here because if I go into my albums, I can tap, grab that now image. So it's no longer recognized as a shape. It's now recognized as an image, because I've created it as an image by taking it into the camera roll. And now if I tap on that shape and go to the paintbrush, I now have the option to set that as a placeholder. So now I get that plus icon, which is a really, really useful thing for students to be able to just identify that they're being asked to do something. So have a play with that. It takes a bit of practice. If you've not done it before, it's just that drag up from the bottom, tap and hold on the icon, drag it out, keep your finger on it the whole time, and then drop it into position. And then you can drag things between the two. We did look at this in the previous session around the role of the iPad. So again, please feel free to watch that video for just a bit more of an input. But again, this is the application of that skill in terms of using split screen and drag and drop. Okay, so it's looking quite nice. We're starting to build this kind of first page. It's pretty simple in order to do. You know, it's just creating boxes. I'm going to leave this page blank because actually I did say in the recording that you could draw your own picture. So in order to do that, if you aren't aware, I'm just trying to get rid of my my dock here. Should be on the screen. Get this to go down. There we go. If I tap on the plus and go to drawing, I also have the options to be able to draw on the screen. So actually what might be quite nice here is to actually draw this element. So I'm not an artist, so this is going to be very rough. But I'm just going to draw. There we go. Not the greatest picture in the world. But just to indicate that the student could draw in this space. So all they would need to do is the same thing, obviously erase the picture that I've created in there, and then just use the drawing tools to draw their own picture. So again, it might not be that they want to add a photo of themselves, it might be that they want to draw a picture of themselves as well. And choice is a very powerful tool when it comes to working in the classroom. We'll look at the drawing tools in more detail when we look at application of those in the classroom. So again, if you want to just have a play if you're making this book about yourselves, you might want to just draw directly on the screen. But the ability to have that as an option for students means that in this page alone, they can type their name into this box. They can handwrite their name in this box. They could record an audio of their name in the box. Down here, they could take a photo, they could record a video of themselves, or they could draw a picture of themselves. So again, we're just providing students with a range of ways to access the information and to submit what they know, understand about, in this case, it's just something about them. But as we develop it, it's going to be more about the water cycle itself. Okay, so our next page here, again, we've got some text boxes that I could utilize. I could, start to design my work around. Here I could add in lots of information. This is just a holding text page. I'm just going to put in, what do we currently know about the water cycle? Now, again, just bearing in mind that I've talked about this idea of adding an audio recording. We could do the same thing here and have audio recording on each page. And it's not a bad idea to do that. Remembering as well, in the last session, we did look at the ability to select the text. So if students know that they can do that, it also means that they don't need to have an audio recording each one, because they could utilize the speak function and have it speak to them. There is something nice about having a teacher's input, though, certainly in a remote learning environment, because it is more personalized to them. So we're just going to add that in. That's going to be our question that we're going to ask. I could utilize some of these boxes as well, make the text bigger. I don't really want this one on the page. I'm going to change this one though, because I think it would be quite useful to have some of that pre-existing information. So I'm going to go back to that picture I had of the water cycle. I'm going to add this in. Double tap it just to resize, make sure it fits in. And again, kind of want to support the students by, a range of ways for them to add this information in. So on this page, I'm actually going to ask them to draw their own version of the water cycle. Now, again, there's a couple of ways that students could do this. If they tap on the plus icon and go to drawing, on their screens, they have those drawing tools that they could start to use. And they might want to just start to sketch out the different things. So we know that clouds are part of it. I have to say they're clouds in case people don't know. Like I said, my art's not great the best of the time, especially when I'm doing it as a live demo. And then we talk about the hills. So again, this is what the students would do as a response on their page. And then I can change the color of the pens. I'll put some water in down here. And then also I'll put a sun up here. So this is how the students would respond. Let's go back to that blue. So we could talk about rain falling. Just mark this. And rivers forming that flow down towards the sea. And then the sun might give off its rays, or does give off its rays. And that's going to cause evaporation. And then we get new clouds form that move back over to the hills and mountains where that water falls. So very, very simply, I've provided students with a way to just document their learning in a drawing context. So again, changing the way, traditionally they might write this down in a book. They might draw this and then stick that picture in a book or draw it directly into the book, which is all great. But what we can also add to this is record that audio. So this is from the student's point of view now. Students being able to demonstrate their knowledge of something through adding their voice, because if they have a barrier to learning, which is the spelling of certain words, etc., then they might not actually give you all the information you want. But how quick and easy is it for them to just tap on record? This is the water cycle. I know that when the rain falls, it runs into rivers and streams, and then that eventually leads out to the ocean. And then the sun will evaporate that water, causing clouds to form, which then end up becoming rain clouds, and the whole process starts again. And I'm sure any student in a primary school will be able to explain it in a lot more detail than I just did, but just as a very quick overview. And you can see now that I've got my drawing and I've got this audio, which has been very, very quick and easy to capture from the student's point of view. And it's more personalized. It's them talking about things. It's their drawing of things. What we can also do with this, if I select the drawing, something which is really, really useful, if I tap on the paintbrush, I can now change this drawing to be an animated drawing. So if I turn this on, you'll see down the bottom, I get this option to play the drawing, and I can loop this as well. So it just keeps going. Pretty good for a water cycle because it is a continuous cycle. I can add titles and captions to this if I want to. If we just come out for a second from the teacher point of view, Two things here that I can assess. I can listen to that audio recording, or I can tap on the play drawing, and it's going to show how that student has kind of drawn their kind of whole process. Now it's going through very quickly. So in fact, if I tap on this, and let's make the duration a little bit longer. Start that again. We can see how that kind of process builds, and my rain hasn't come out very well, or my evaporation, but you get the idea. So the process kind of loops round, and then supported with that audio content, very, very useful for the students to be able to demonstrate learning in just an alternative way. Now, I haven't designed the whole page very nicely. I mean, the text here is a bit too small. I could make that bigger. Again, you can play around with these things to change the text style, size, fonts, etc., as we've already looked at. So that's another really, really useful way for students to be able to utilize how they can demonstrate their learning, how they can demonstrate all of those things within this document. So this is what we currently know. Then the next page might actually be some actual content that we want to create for them. So in this one, I'm going to just take this as a placeholder, tap on the plus. I'm going to go to choose photos. And I actually did some recording a few weeks ago of some rain falling. As most teachers do, we very rarely ever clock off. So if you see an opportunity, oops, it's not going to download because it's in the cloud at the moment. Try it one more time. We see an opportunity and we think that, you know what, that might be really useful in a lesson that I might be teaching in the future at some point. So we capture these things. So that's what I did. I saw an opportunity and thought that might be quite useful. So here we go. So this is a video shot in slow motion of rain falling in my back garden. But I thought it was quite nice because I filmed it in slow motion so that you can actually look in a little bit more detail at what happens when the water droplets drop down. You can see, you know, splashing upwards. You can see the ripple effect on the water. I did plan, I just ran out, I didn't think to go and take another video. I did plan to have another one of the evaporation. So actually the same day, but less water being on it, because then you could talk about, well, where has the water gone? So that's the question that I'm actually going to ask in here. So what happens to the puddles when it rains? So I'm just posing a question now to the student. And again, this is just about that building of the content. I'm just using this as a template page. So again, I'm just going to put the text up a little bit higher. I'm going to add it's a little bit bigger so it's easier for the students to read. Again, I could add an audio recording in there, but I'm directly going to link this to the video. So I want the video to come in here because I'm going to be expecting them to tap on that. And in fact, I might move all this over to this side. And again, this isn't necessarily around design or anything at the moment. This is more around just, you know, what the possibilities of the application are. But I'm just going to add in this, you know, what happens to the puddles when it rains. And then I want the students to be able to respond. So I'm just going to put a box in here. And in this case, again, they're going to have options. So this is useful to kind of just template for those things. They could add some written text in here. They could equally add some audio in here. So I'm going to make this, again, obvious that this is an audio space by doing the same thing as before. If I just type in record, there's a recording icon. And again, I'm going to make sure that this obviously in a visual way shows the students that they could record an audio here. Let's just change the color. And I'm just going to link the two together. Make it a little bit bigger so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. Group them together. So they're on the page. And there's something which is really, really useful at this point and useful to bring up here. If students tap by this box, they can also drag this around, and that can become quite confusing as to what you're asking them to do. So something else which is really, really useful if you're designing a page like this where you want, so not necessarily on this one because you want them to be able to interact, but this one here, this is just fixed content. Equally here, this was just a drawing panel. This one is going to be a writing panel, so I want them to be able to tap into the box. This one is just an icon to say you could record your voice. So what I would do on these ones is if I tap on the paintbrush and come to this arrange section, So if it's just a single icon like this, you'll get all the options, and arrange is at the end. Because I've grouped this, arrange is the only option I have. And what I'm going to do is lock this into place. This means now that I can't move that on the screen. So it's fixed on the screen. So students are not going to be able to move anything around. That can be very useful because this, as it is a touch screen, if they tap on some of these things and go to play it, they're going to move them. In some instances, like I want them to be able to play this, I want them to be able to type in here. So there's not a lot I can do about that, because if I lock it, they won't be able to type in it. But for this one, that is just a place where I want them to add in their voice recording. So let's lock that in place if it doesn't need to be moved. Similarly for the text box here, I might lock that in place because actually I don't need them to do anything with it. So now I'm limiting the amount of things that they can move around on the screen, which just keeps that flow of information for them. So again, so I've got a box here that allows them to record their voice. I've got a box here where they might want to add in, it could be a drawing again, could be some writing, could be handwritten if they use the draw tool, etc. So lots and lots of different ways that they can add in that information. And we could continue to go through this whole build process of all of the different things that they could add into their document. But what we've created, or what we're starting to create, and you'll see, it's only been about 30 minutes or so, is a resource which is rich in terms of how students interact with it, how we share information to the students, how it can then be personalized to the individuals in the class, because they don't necessarily all have to respond in exactly the same way. But equally, it does allow them to respond in a way that I might need them to. So if I want it to be specifically written, I just give that as a title, but it might not be that the whole book needs to be written. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the range of things that they have the option to do. So we've added in our All About Me page. We've added in some what do we currently know. We've posed a question, so something for them to explore. And again, could even be that they create their own videos here. But then let's have a look at what we can do with this next. So let's imagine we've created this full booklet. And in fact, I've got a booklet that I'm going to use to demonstrate this in more detail. So this is kind of a completed workbook in exactly the same way as you've just seen. It's a single page. In fact, it's using exactly the same overview. Out of the way. I've just changed the text here, put some pictures in, exactly the same as before. And this uses that same context. So there are places in this booklet that are just workspace activities for students to be able to use in the same way as I've started to do with this with the water booklet. So let's imagine that this book then needs to go to all of the students. How do we do that in a simple and straightforward way? We want to cut down on workload for teachers. So photocopying booklets, that's time consuming. It's also costly because of all the paper, etc. So all we can simply do is tap on the share icon, and we've got multiple ways that we can share this out to the students depending on the platforms you're on. If I'm face-to-face with the students, I can tap share and I can airdrop this. So if I tap on airdrop, I can airdrop this to all the students in the classroom. If I'm using Apple Classroom, then it's going to come up with my classroom name, and it's just going to send it out to everybody who's in that classroom. So one couple of taps and it's going to send it out to those students. If I'm working remotely from them, or I want to send it in a more structured, formalized way, I also have the option to share it to all of the utilized platforms that you might have. As long as they're on my device as an application, I'm going to be able to connect to it here. So if you're using Teams or Seesaw or Shobi or Google Classroom, etc., I can just easily tap on this. It's going to take it and send it out to that class. So for example, if I tap on Shobi, I think I've got some classes set up on my device. It's going to give me the option of some classes, and it's going to take that and send that out to the students in a way where they can download it and utilize it on their device as well. So again, in terms of sharing resources, creating resources, we have that personalized approach. We also have that really, really quick and easy way to be able to share this on to people. Let's take a look at this one then. So this is, I was building something before. This is, again, just a very, very simple way, a one-pager. So instead of creating that full journal of multiple pages, if you wanted to just try this with your class, it doesn't necessarily have to be a full booklet. This is an example of the same approach where I've just used several of those features to enable the students to be able to explain the water cycle. So, simple title at the top. I've utilized shapes here. Again, they might not be artists. Not everybody wants to be able to draw pictures because of that fear of I can't draw. So therefore, in this one, we've utilized the shapes, and I've just searched for certain shapes: cloud, raindrop, sun. This one's just an expression of water. This is just a triangle that I've just grabbed and made a triangle over a rectangle to look like a hill. Very, very simplistic things, but then actually writing on top of it, I can explore that water cycle. Over here, again, the audio recording. And then over here, this is just a picture that then I allow the students to be able to draw on top. And this is, I wanted to sort of demonstrate this because this is where you can bring out other things. So it's just a picture really of the water cycle in a very, very basic form. There's no text on the screen at all other than what the student might add. And here, this is where students may, or you would hope that if you give them a chance to express, share a little bit more information. So here, the kind of idea is that the student has taken that picture and then started to think differently about how you might use the water cycle for something else. So here they're talking about, you could put a dam here, and that might be an option to generate hydroelectric power. It could be down here, they've thought about filtering systems to stop plastic and waste going into the ocean, because they understand that, all of the rubbish that might get collected down here could be stored here before it goes out into the oceans to pollute things. So again, you're just providing students with a range of alternative ways in order to demonstrate their knowledge. And something that's quite useful on a page like this is another really, really nice feature, depending on whether you've got managed Apple ID set up in your school, is to be able to collaborate on this document. So again, from a classroom perspective, students can have this option to collaborate, so they can make changes, and then two students could work on the same document at the same time, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, even if remotely they're not working in the same classroom at the same time. So really, that's it in terms of the creation of the resources. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward way to just build those things. This, like I said, is used on an existing template to just modify things. You don't even need to necessarily go into the changes that I've made here. You could just utilize the page and add your text in, which is where notes comes in very useful. That if you take the things that you've created from the point of view of what you've done in your notes, you could utilize that. So if I go to here, let's imagine that this is my water cycle, and here's some notes that I've been collecting and some pictures that I've collected, etc. I can utilize all of this in the same way as before. So this is my note-taking lesson planning. If I then bring up pages and go split screen, rather than having to do everything, live within the booklet, here's the text that I think is going to be really useful. I'm going to add in a new page on my book here. And actually, let's use this one because I'm going to use text. And I'm going to select the text that I've found whilst I've been doing some research as a teacher. Let's just grab this on the page. Similar to before, tap and hold. And let me drag that across, drop that, and that text is now copied over onto the page over here. Now, it could be that that's research I've done online. So again, I might want to have the link in it as well. So let's actually just make that into a link. Drop it down a line. Make the text bigger on this page. Again, those editing tools that you've had before. So it's easier for students to be able to read and reflect on, along with that page link that's going to take them to it again. So not everything, like I said, has to be built live. It could be the case of using that split screen function in order to get that information from another source and add it to this source. So we've looked at a whole range of options here within Pages. So the ability to add in different elements, the ability to edit those elements, the ability to be able to collaborate, and the ability to be able to share that information with others as well. Now, there is an awful lot of other things that you can do within Pages. One thing that I think is really useful when it comes to student created work is the ability to create and share something to a wider audience. And one thing that you can do now direct from Pages is to be able to publish the work to Apple Books. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to charge anyone to download it, but it definitely gives a platform for students to be able to showcase the things that they've done. It's not to say you do this for everything, but it could be that it's part of a project going forward where students might want to be able to showcase the things that they've done. The process is fairly simple. You just need to have an Apple ID, which is registered. So usually this would be a class account that you might create. Teachers could create one for themselves and publish the students' work through that, etc. Or it's one that the school utilizes. But what it means is that that work can then be shared using a URL and could be downloaded anywhere. And that changes the whole aspect of, you know, the quality of the work. Now, I've done this with my own son. I'm sure he'll get embarrassed at some point. He's still young enough to appreciate that he does this. If I just search on here for some of the stuff he's done, these are books that he's created. So I'll show you them in the bookstore itself. So these are books in the bookstore that he has created. This one was one he did a fair few years ago now, using the same idea of just building something using voice. So this was created, there we go, 4 years ago now. And within the book, if I just open it up, you can see that it has that range of text, video, etc. In order to utilize this. His handwriting wasn't the neatest at the time, but do you know what? That didn't stop him, because he's added in his audio recordings. He's added in videos of him sharing some information. And he's a published author at the age of, what was he, 7 years old, 6 years old? And all of this is something which is there for him to be able to reflect back on and see how his own learning has progressed. So there's something, you know, really, really powerful about this idea of sharing information to a wider audience. So that's it. Hopefully you've been able to have a good look into how to get started with creating the books, etc. Just to finish off then, to say, you can, like I said, publish these books. There is a fantastic support guide that you can access here from Apple, which talks about the whole process of how to publish from Pages and how, you know, that whole process works. So please do check that out. It's a very, very useful document that you can get hold of. And the last thing is, if you haven't already started your Apple Teacher journey, please do jump into Apple Teacher. Go into the Pages section, have a look at the skills. We've covered the majority of them today in terms of the application of how you would use them, but always double check back. There's new things that you might learn in terms of some of those skills. And then finally, take the test and you'll get your Apple badge around the Pages tool. In the journal that I mentioned before, there are also some additional challenges in there. It'd be great if people could have a go at those things. And then, as always, we would love to hear what you are using in your classroom, specifically on the back of this session around the use of Pages. So please do share what you've been doing using the following hashtags. And it'd be great if you could tag us into those using our @South Wales RTC. And that ends the session. So thank you so much to those people that have joined in live. Thank you to all those people that have watched these this session on recording. I hope everybody has a pleasant holiday season coming up. And just to highlight, we have some more sessions starting in the new year. So if you haven't booked onto any of those, please feel free to book onto those. And thank you very much.